Oh, there we go. Okay, it is 11 o'clock, and I will call this special meeting of the San Benito County Housing Advisory Committee to order. If you could please read the special procedures.
Shelby.
The San Benito Housing Advisory Committee welcomes your comments. Each individual speaker will be limited to a presentation total of 3 minutes. When addressing the commission via Zoom, phone, or in the chambers, please state your name and county in which you reside for the record. Please address the commission as a whole through the chair. If participating on Zoom, select the Participants tab and click the Raise Hand icon. If you are using a phone, please press 9 to raise your hand. When your turn arrives, you will hear that you have been unmuted. If participating in person in the chamber, please complete a speaker card identifying the item on which you wish to speak and provide your completed card to the clerk prior to consideration of time. Speaker cards are available on the table at the entrance.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance, Supervisor Zanger, if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could get a roll call, please.
Board of Supervisor B. Gonzalez,
Here.
District 5.
Here.
Board of Supervisor Dom Zanger.
Here.
Chair of Planning Commission Robert Gibson.
Present.
Planning Commissioner Richard Way.
Present.
Community Public Member Victor Gomez. Here. Housing Public Member Seth Caprone. Here. Sorry.
Financial and Accounting Public Member John Casey.
Here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Can I get an acknowledgement of certificate of posting? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public comment. This is an opportunity to address the committee on items of interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken unless provided by Government Code Sections 54954.2. Is there any public comment via Zoom?
No, there is not.
Any public comment in the chambers?
No, there is not.
Seeing none, public comment is closed. Regular agenda, item number 6. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion on the table?
I'll move to adopt the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Oh, I'm sorry. Can we do a roll call vote, please? I'm sorry, Joel. Do we need to do a roll call vote for the minutes? No. Okay. Sorry. Moving on.
Item number 7, review the 2023 Housing Advisory Committee schedule.
All right. So if I could get my my screen pulled up, please.
Can we have one screen tilted toward us? They're both to the audience.
Thank you, Dana. And then I realize there's a lot of text here. I tried to make this as large as possible. You guys have a hard copy of this in your packet. So essentially, here's what I've put together as a potential schedule for the entire year of 2023. So based on our last meeting, I have set up our regular meetings on a quarterly schedule, and then meetings outside of that quarterly schedule will be special meetings. So there are some considerations to think about. For June, the June meeting, the special meeting of Monday, June 5th. I'm sorry, it's July. The special meeting on Monday, July 3rd. July 4th is a government holiday. So if you guys are still willing to meet on July 3rd, on Monday, July 3rd, we can do that. Or an alternative date would be to push it out a week to July 10th.
As to all of your alternate dates, I would like to move that we suggest those. I looked at the calendar, and there are a few that run very close to the Board of Supervisors dates, and so let's go ahead, and if it's the will of the board, that we go ahead and accept the July 10th, the August 14th, and the November 13th, and the September What did you do with September?
So it would still be September
18th,
18th.
okay.
Or I put
We
it
have a
as a
reprieve.
possible reprieve month.
Okay, so let's skip that one and we'll go for a discussion, but let's accept the alternative dates of July 10th, August 14th, and November 13th. And then we can talk about the September date, whether everybody wants to have it or not.
Seth?
Under discussion on that, I will be out of the state on August 14th.
Okay, so that could be one of your missed dates then, if you wouldn't mind.
And I can also review the materials for that with you prior. And if you have any comments, I can share your comments at the meeting.
Thank you.
Is there any other comment regarding the change of the dates?
Mr. Chair, if I could, really quick, just, I think we do have a couple of allowable absences.
Yes.
But I won't be able to make September nor the August meeting. But those, well, except for August, but May I won't be able to make either. So just want to make that.
The special meetings don't count as one of your missed dates, only the regular ones.
I would like to get some clarification on that from Joel. I was reading the updates to AB 361, and they're a little. There's a lot of legalese, as Joel likes to put, and so it's a little hard to interpret. Joel, if we set up a special meeting outside of the regular meetings, does the voting still apply to those special meetings in regards to whether they have to be in person or via teleconference?
Any meeting at which a vote is being taken has to comply with those.
Okay, so even a special meeting, we still have to follow through with, so you either have to have a permitted absence to be virtual, and then your vote will count, or if you're absent and you're in person, then your vote doesn't count.
But
The meeting was purely informational, and
So that's another thing we could try to do, is that only special meetings will be informational, and then all the decision-making will be done on the quarterly meetings, which will require that in-person attendance.
that would probably be a good idea.
Yes, I would concur.
Okay, so then anything that requires a motion, I will do my absolute best to put on a regular meeting. And then maybe if it's something that we need a little extra time to work on, I can begin presenting it as an informational item during the special meetings.
Seth?
I wonder about not having any action items at special meetings. It seems like the way the ordinance is set up, there may be things in the pipeline that are supposed to come before us, and it may be problematic to put those off for 3 months.
Right, so I think that's why we could do informational, so I can begin presenting the item during those special meetings, and then we'll come back during our regular meeting, and we'll already have received the information. If you're not present, we can work on sharing with you the minutes, we can work on sharing with you the recording of this meeting, if you want to catch up on any information you missed, and then maybe we come back at a regular meeting and then make those decisions.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to missing meetings. I was referring to, in the ordinance, there's some things that are supposed to be brought to the HAC for a recommendation, and then go to the Planning Commission and the board. And I don't know, but I think that in the Planning Commission and board approval process of some things, having to wait for 3 months or 2 months, whatever it would be, might create a problem for keeping that process moving.
You know,
they might, and if you had a special meeting required under that, then attendance would be required to vote on it at a special meeting.
So I think to your point, I don't think there's any way we're going to make every single possible scenario work. So there's going to be some adjustments we're going to need to make. So I think to Joel's point, if there is something that we absolutely have to make a decision on during a special meeting, I can make sure that everyone's aware of that in advance, and try to get as many people here in person as possible. We only need a quorum to make decisions. So if I at least have 4 members in person, we could move forward with that.
As long as, hopefully you'll be online and you can comment and help craft the policy.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about being there. I was just worried about restricting the special meetings, but it sounds like it's going to be flexible.
Yeah. Fluidity is always good.
Yeah. So then let's go back to September then. Do we want to make September a reprieve month where we don't meet? It sounds like, I think I heard Victor said he has an issue with September. Or do we want to meet on Monday, the 18th?
I don't mind a reprieve date. These meetings are meeting more frequently than I bargained for initially, and I don't know about anybody else, but we initially discussed about meeting, not monthly, and that's what it's been, and so I would love a reprieve in September.
Sure. Works for
I
me.
would agree with that, with the addition that, if it turned out that there was something that came up that needed our attention, we could certainly revisit that closer to September.
Okay.
Doesn't matter to me. It's fine.
Okay, perfect. So do we need a motion to adopt this schedule then with the amendments discussed here?
So moved?
I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Perfect. So then through the chair, would we like to move on to the next item on the agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're gonna invite the San Benito High School District up to come give us a update. And so we have Sean Tenenbaum and Jeffrey Small here, and let me pull up your PowerPoint. And all you have to do is press the space bar to move forward.
Well, good morning, everybody. Madam Chair, committee members, thank you so much for having Jeff and I. So Sean Tenenbaum, Superintendent of the High School District. Jeff Smalls, our Financial Advisor, Capital PFG. I think we know many of you, so if we don't, we want to get to know you. And we have the opportunity this morning to really not only talk about delivering a second high school, but talk about the growth and expansion of the district from staff member perspective and the need for affordable housing that will go along with that. As we grow, just like you're growing as a city and a county and the municipalities, et cetera, the district staff members are growing exponentially to meet the growth of our student population. So we thought it would be a good idea to partner and share an update and see if there's any questions from the committee. So obviously our number one challenge really is taking a look at the fact that we are at capacity. The high school is at capacity, just under 3,500 students right now, and we are quickly becoming what I would characterize as a destination high school. We have many families that are moving into Hollister because of what we have to offer, but also because of the quality of life in San Benito County, et cetera. So we hear many positive comments. But that is bringing folks from the Silicon Valley along the Central Coast and all parts of California to an area that is really beautiful. And then we have a wonderful campus. And so ultimately, Jeff and I, are seeking input on the delivery of the second high school. Also, we're asking for your partnership and moving forward regarding affordable homes and how we can work together. Jeff and I had a recent conversation with Eden Homes, so we did meet with them regarding their project that they have in the city, and then we're going to be visiting one of the school districts in the Bay Area that has already built teacher workforce housing and is moving forward with that. So those are things that we're looking at.
If I could
Yeah, Joy.
request that you focus your comments today not on delivery of a second high school, because that's not within the purview of this committee, but on the issue of affordable housing or workforce housing.
Absolutely. And thank you. So we'll try to tie everything in the best we can, so I appreciate that. Obviously, our number one objective is to work with the city, the county, the HAC, and any other group that we, meaning the district, has an opportunity to partner, especially with affordable housing, the need to make sure that we have adequate space for our new employees, existing employees, and growing employees. So that would be one of our greatest objectives, to work with the HAC.
Thank you. Community is important when it comes down to thinking about the only viable site that the school has right now. We'll talk more about that, the best road site, and bringing affordable housing, bringing a new school, and bringing the infrastructure that the community needs to continue to grow and retain and recruit teachers. With that, we've been actively working with the city, the county, and the community to explore different options for delivering that second high school and also retaining and recruiting our teachers. The magnitude of a new high school, as you know, is enormous, as is the need for affordable housing. Working with the development community, the Building Industry Association, and other landowners is going to be critical to obtain funding for that high school and also satisfy the affordable housing requirements that we have. The local land use agencies are also going to be key. I mean, this is an area where, we really need to work together to deliver the land use planning of where that school is going to be, what the district does with that Best Road project, and affordable housing that can actually be brought to that location if that coincides with the land use that's desired by the county and the city. Thus, we've been working a lot with the county, the city. We've made presentations to the intergovernmental community. Tomorrow, we're going to be meeting with the Sunny Slope Water District. Their partnership is going to be very critical to serving that Best Road site. And of course, working with our community. And for those of you who don't know, the district every month has a facility needs community. And we're getting a good 50 or 60 residents coming to these meetings talking about the second high school, where it should be, how it will be funded, what type of ed programs there are, what type of shared facilities there are. And really that is a great tool for the community to really give us their mandate as to what they're expecting, rather than just come from an agency directly to the community. It's just taking that reverse. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I don't know if it's okay to ask questions now,
sure.
but
Sure.
if I could, do you know what the district demand is for housing? Because obviously, some teachers they have their own home already, and so on and so forth. But have you done a survey with your employees to see who would actually? It would likely be rent. It would have to be rental housing, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an answer, Sean.
Yeah, I don't have a formal answer, Victor, in terms of, but I can survey and would be happy to survey the staff. What I do know is one of the number one stumbling blocks that we have in terms of recruiting teachers to this area is finding affordable housing. The rental market is very steep right now. The availability is very small. And so when we're looking at somebody coming into Hollister that doesn't have a family member, doesn't have the ability to have a partner, a spouse that's working, and can afford something greater. So that is, it's a challenge.
Did you, Sean, really quick, did you have, I understand that, that the Lee project, the Lee subdivision was shot down by the county, but in that agreement with the developer, not only to increase fees for the second high school, but in the deed restriction, were there deed restrictions for teacher housing on site?
There was an opportunity to work with the developer to adequately set aside some type of housing for local employees, whether they be HPD, sheriff, teachers, et cetera, that would qualify. There was discussions and exploration regarding how we would actually implement that system. I know Salinas has a system, I believe, where they have some type of lottery, et cetera. But yes, that was a huge part of the discussion, and happy to have that.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. So just taking a look at, just real quick, the capacity, and I want to kind of share where we are. So last year we were 3492. That's student population. Staff-wise, we're over 350 staff members on campus right now, including our substitutes and all of our at-will coaches, if you will. We're over 400 employees now, and many of them do live locally, and I will provide some information at a later date. So that's a very important statistic to take a look at. Where are we going? So projected enrollment, the need for affordable housing. If you take a look at where we were on the left-hand side to where we will be on the right-hand side, again, these are just projections. we're taking a look at the number of residential units that are either in the pipeline or moving. We're looking at students who are in the existing system. And again, these vacillate depending on, the number of students that we actually matriculate on campus. But there is a parallel. As our student population grows, as I mentioned, so do our staff members, and they grow as well. So I think it's really important that, when we're working together and we're taking a look at the opportunity to find affordable housing, to create affordable housing, to partner on that aspect, it really goes hand in hand with our student enrollment growth. Taking a look at, our school capacity, we mentioned this before, 3437, our school capacity enrollment in October was 3467, so we're actually in a delta situation there for the number of students that are coming into Hollister High School.
So school site selection it's very complex, it's multi-phased. There are certain requirements for safety that the district has to meet in terms of location of a school. Think of underground pipelines. There's also other local factors such as where are the students today and where do we think that they will be over time. And of course, there's also approvals, required at the local level. So it was very important for us to show you where the current students are. And so you can see on this slide, this is the current attendance within the district. That's the Hollister High School up in blue, the upside down hammer, Gavilan College, their campus, and Best Road is a site that the district owns free and clear. So that's where the current student population is. We've also taken a look at some of the new development and planning areas. So you've got your Buena Vista corridor, Meridian, Union corridors, and you can't really see them here, but we've gone ahead and we've counted those areas where development has been approved or development is expected and where those developments are. And the purpose of doing that is to better understand where our potential student population is going to be over time. So this is a heat map. It overlays our current population and then extrapolates that to those areas of known development, including those planning areas. As you can see, a lot of the new development is going to be, really north of Best Road. There was a larger project, that Lima project, that I guess seems to be stalled out, and who knows if that will ever come back. But there really just is not a lot of development planned for this part of the county. However, that is where the district does own current property. This is another map. It just shows you a little bit more of a school site location, or at least a possible school site location. And this site is about 70 acres, owned free and cleared by the district. General plan has it as residential mixed use, rural. The size of a school site should be 50 acres. So that leaves about 20 acres that can be developed. And one option really is to work closely with the county on affordable housing. And, the district will, if this property is used fully for a high school or partially for a high school, this is an area that the district believes can really work closely to help with affordable housing. And as Dr. Tannenbaum said, it's very important to retaining and recruiting teachers. You got an exposure from Airline Highway. We wanted to get some input from you. I mean, ultimately, we're going to have to come back to you, particularly if there's development in affordable housing. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Tannenbaum.
Yeah, and I think this is, thank you, Jeff. I think it's a really important dialogue to have that two-way conversation and the opportunity to hear from, the committee as well as the County Board of Supervisors, the City Council, the development community. Our goal is to really work collaboratively on that. And so we have three questions that we've posed, and starting on the left-hand side, is the new high school needed? we're reaching out to our community at large right now, and we're receiving, information back. And overwhelmingly, based on the input we've received, there is a necessity. Number two, is Best Road the optimal location for a second high school? That isn't a question we've asked yet to everybody. But we thought we would start with you and taking a look at, where we are. And if I can go back arrow here, I think it's really important, as the Housing Advisory Committee, and we look for affordable housing, we look for opportunities to partner, is the Best Road an optimal location? And I don't know how you would respond, but we thought we would ask you this morning.
If I may,
Thank you. Bea.
I can't say if I'm on board or not on board for a second high school. I have grandchildren there, and I see how crowded it is when I go to pick them up. You have to really plan out where you're going to pick someone up. Otherwise, you get congested down in the traffic. But that's not different from any other school in San Benito County. We've grown beyond our capacity in many, many ways. But the projects that have been brought to the Board of Supervisors, we keep looking at this problem as vehicle miles traveled. And so if your project goes forward and we as a supervisor have to look at that in its planned location, you're going to have a problem with the vehicle miles traveled in terms of getting that approved. I would assert maybe someplace on the west side of Hollister being an alternate location for this. And again, I know this is not the conversation, and as I prepared for this meeting today, I was trying to find how does this relate to the hack, and I do know that there was a component, but I would like to focus on that component of the affordable housing, because God knows we all need affordable housing in this community. And where I currently live, there are two teachers, one from the high school and one from the elementary, that had difficulty finding houses. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I was right there myself looking for a rental for myself. But focus your presentation on the affordable housing, please, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Seth?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was on the high school site selection for Enzar High School for a couple of years and know what a challenge it is. We looked at every parcel in the district that was over 40 acres, and there's so many constraints. I know it's really hard to get everything you need, but I know looking for me, future growth, which you've sort of shown on there, should have a relationship to the future high school site, and the Best Road site doesn't look like it's in good relation to future growth, just in terms of what you've shown us. Like Supervisor Gonzalez, I applaud your efforts to incorporate affordable housing into a project wherever you build it. Perhaps an opportunity even at a different site to purchase excess acreage and use that for housing.
And thank you for the comments, Chair Gonzalez and Seth. I appreciate that very much. I think it's really important for us to have that open dialogue, as I mentioned. These are not easy challenges. There are two things that really inhibit our young generation from becoming educators. One is student debt, which is overwhelmingly, weighing them down, and the second is affordability. So when we think of that, when we talk about the best and brightest, mathematics, science, educators that are going to help teach, those two factors, they go hand in hand. And many of our young folks that are coming to us, they're well educated, but they're saddled with debt, and then we have to find some type of affordable housing that goes with it. So I think, our strategy of not only school site selection, but, where can we partner with the HAC, the county, et cetera, on creating opportunities for our educators, for our staff members, for our administrators, to live in the county that they wish to live in. So thank you.
Before you continue, I just have a question, or perhaps it's a comment.
Yeah.
When the last housing project came before the Planning Commission and the board, it was shared that there was an excess contribution above and beyond what was required.
That is correct.
And I'm curious if there was a general number of what that would have been per unit, and then to calculate how many units would have to be built to build a new high school. And with the way government operates, I wouldn't say it's going to be 200 million. I mean, we tried that with 25, and went from 240 to 340 million in 6 months, and that's just how government tends to operate. So I'm curious if there's a calculation of how many units we would have to approve if we're going to tie education to housing. How many is that? I did a rough calculation and I came up with 60,000 units. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at some point we have to figure out how to do things without becoming Silicon Valley ourselves, because that's not what we want, or at least not what I want.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and those are excellent questions. So taking a look at, what we had up on the screen, I believe, did I move it off? Oh, maybe I moved it off.
It's at the.
Is it? Okay.
Have a controller back there.
Okay, thank you. And so we had a level 2 fee, which is our statutory requirement at $298. We were able to negotiate with the developer for a $5 per square foot charge. And I believe off that one particular development, it was roughly about 1.6 million. I think they had 141 units, 25 ADUs, if I remember right, somewhere in that ballpark. But in terms of taking a look at the overall picture, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about?
So it's
I
only
think that
30,000 homes.
probably the best way to characterize, I'm just going to use a working example to try to frame it in a simple way, right? And let's just go with information that we have available to us. So if you assume the cost of a high school is, let's say it's $200 million. And let's say that there's 5,000 homes. Now, the district, as you know, we're not the land use agency, so we have no, we don't interfere with the various approvals. We simply try to work with the approvals that are given, and as part of that, we do try to negotiate with the development community to increase the fees because we know that they're insufficient. And I think that's a stipulated fact, actually, among the development community in the district. I don't think anybody would disagree, but so if you have 5,000 homes, that would support a 1,500 student school, okay? So that basically is $40,000 a home, right? 200 million, 5,000 homes, that's 40 grand. So where does that 40 grand come from? Well, if we're getting $3 a square foot, and if you want to just take a single family home, and we know that now there's going to be more multifamily homes, and the area, of course, needs smaller homes so that they are affordable. But just again, as far as a working example, 2,000 square feet times $3 a square, that's $6,000. Now, the district will get state funding, and if you want to allocate that on a home basis, and there are slides in the appendix that will back up what I'm saying, that's about $9 grand. So for every home that's built, there's a delta of 40,000 minus the 15, that's $25,000. So that $25,000 cost with each door that's approved, it's coming at a loss to the district that we have to find a way to make that up. And there are two basic ways. One is to reach out to the development community and ask for voluntary contributions above that minimum amount. Now, why would they do that? Well, they do that because they know that if they want to continue building homes, the kids have to go somewhere. The public infrastructure is needed just like it's needed in all the other public facilities example. Number two, the community. And the community will have the opportunity to approve voter-approved bonds, but we are limited as to the amount of bonds that can be approved because there's a tax rate limitation of $30 per 100,000 of assessed value. So our commitment to the community is to exhaust every possible avenue for funding and maximize our resources to help the community shoulder that burden of funding that new school. Now, that's a little bit of a longer explanation, but I think it's an important one just to understand the basic framework that we're working with. So in the case of increasing that fee to $3 to $5, is that everything that we need? It's not everything, but it's a step in the right direction, and we need to go well above that.
If I might, I think it's whether the fee, as you've characterized it, the school impact fee, is a minimum or a maximum under state law is something that I think my office needs to discuss with your legal counsel. I think, th-
Be happy to do that.
I won't go into it in detail here and now.
Supervisor Zanger?
And the county has no authority to charge a fee in excess of the legislative maximum for school impact fees. Now, the school district's welcome to enter into any kind of voluntary agreement with developers. They can negotiate, but the county cannot charge or collect a fee in excess of the statutory limit.
Okay, Supervisor Zanger?
Oh, yeah, he just kind of answered my question. That was it. I was just wondering how that fee, if that could be changed at all and how that would look, but I suppose not.
Okay.
Perhaps, Victor.
Can address that, but that limit is something that the development community has fought very hard to establish and defend over many years. I worked with the city of Newman on this in the mid-2000s, and I don't believe it's changed since then.
Yeah, I would just preface this by my next comments by saying that that I've had mixed reactions, and you folks know I've met with you a number of times. We've had mixed reactions from developers because really at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the developer to make that decision. And another thing to maybe help Supervisor Zanger a bit on context is this 298 fee is actually a new fee. So this is new as of, I want to say, August.
August
timeframe.
2022.
And so the fee has been raised already. And so the Nexus study obviously was critical, and it wasn't bad. I'll be candid with you. I wish the fee would have came back at $5. That way we don't have to negotiate it, right? I wouldn't have been opposed to it, and then my clients will pay whatever's on the books, right? But if it's not on the books, that's when it becomes problematic because it's an uneven playing field. For example, Bill Lee stepping up and doing what he did, I commended him for that. But that's not going to be the reaction of all of my clients. They're not going to do that, right? So
Understood.
that's where the challenge, I think, lies to an extent, right? So, but Joel's absolutely right. On the base, we stand, the development community, BIA and others stand firm on that.
Yeah. And Victor, you've been, a great partner, and the opportunity to work with the BIA and Pat has been tremendous. So we have done, a lot of outreach, and thank you for all of the time you spent with us. I think I'll end with this, this morning, and we really appreciate the opportunity. We do. Thank you. These are not easy challenges, as the challenges that are before you for your elected positions. We want to work together. We want to provide you with good information. We want to answer your questions. We want to collaborate. I would like to come back if there's an opportunity. After we meet with Eden Homes, we'd like to go up and visit the teacher workforce housing that's been built in Daly City to understand that model, because this is a really unique time. It's a unique time that the district does have some acreage. We also need to build a high school, but if we can partner that and parlay that with affordable housing and or workforce housing, I think we meet a multitude of needs. So if that opportunity arises, we'd love to come back. Thank you so much for your hospitality this morning, your input. Jeff and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just have one follow-up question, or I guess comment supportive of your comments, Sean. And that is, I'd like to personally be kept up to date, whether it comes back to the hack or not, on your conversation with Eden Housing. I have other developers, and I'm sure Seth has a barrage of laundry list of I'm sure, other nonprofit affordable housing developers out there, because I really see a huge opportunity there, right? I mean, look what Cabrillo College is doing. I mean, I do work in Santa Cruz County, and I have a meeting here with the superintendent of Cabrillo College. We're excited about what they're doing, but it's a huge positive impact to it will be, if they get the funding that they need, will be a huge positive impact to that community, and they've collaborated with the number of sources that are available out there. Santa Cruz County finds itself in a very similar situation as San Benito, right, where you lack funding, there's a lack of funding for affordable housing. But if you develop partnerships like this with the high school, a landowner, and so on, it could be extremely valuable, Sean. So please, both you and Jeff, keep me and maybe us up to date on that conversation with Eden Housing. I'd like to maybe put you in front of another one or two
Please.
affordable housing developers, because this is, I think, going to be even more and more important as we continue to grow.
Okay.
We
Do,
would be
do any
on-
other committee members have any comments?
I just wanted to add the aspect of funding, whatever you can do to find funding outside of taxpayer dollars, because the tenor in the community, though we know the high school is impacted, we know it's crowded and there's unsafe conditions, the taxpayers are taxed out. And so if you're looking for the taxpayers to carry the burden of a bond, the bond it may not be successful. So just consider that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and I just have one more comment. Don't always want to come off as negative. I think it's more realistic than negative. But if you go by the calculations that you provided, we would have to build 30,000 new homes to build a new high school at that rate. Then what happens to the elementary schools? How many more homes do we have to build new elementary schools? I see it as a cycle that we can never get out of, and eventually we will be San Jose. So I think we need to disengage all of the schools and affordable housing. We need to disengage from market rate housing. We're just never going to achieve it. Or we'll have a 6-lane Highway 25, and then that'll cost $500 million to widen. I mean, at some point we have to figure out how to survive as a community without becoming Silicon Valley ourselves. So that's something for everyone to contemplate in between now and the next HAC meeting, because people are saying it's easy. You just get a couple of more dollars from each developer for each unit, but at what cost? And what are the ramifications of building all those homes? I mean, we're busting at the seams. People have an hour and a half, 2-hour commute now, and people don't think, well, it's just 150 units. Well, that's 300 more cars headed to Silicon Valley, or 1,000 units. Oh, it's only 2,000 more cars. Well, you're going to have a 4-hour commute at some point. I mean, planning needs to occur before you build. And I don't think this county or the city has done a very good job in the past. I mean, look where we are. People shouldn't be having to commute, or we're going to end up like Los Angeles, where you have to get up at 2 to get to work, an hour, but it should have been an hour away. I mean, I don't know. I think we need to make some hard decisions. That's just my opinion.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in those comments, to be honest. You know, we were in Bakersfield, just to leave you with this. So I took a team to Bakersfield to see high school number 19 in the Kern High School District. They are the largest high school district in the state of California. High School 19 is on the east side of Bakersfield, if you know the area at all. Wonderful facility. It was their first high school in a decade. So they've had a decade lag of building high schools. But the superintendent who I met with and the principal, and the superintendent said, we become a bedroom community for Los Angeles. I kind of looked at him, Bakersfield? And he said, absolutely. The number one thing, affordability. Affordability. So we'd like to work with you. We'd love the opportunity to come back, and thank you so much for having us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9, amendments to the committee bylaws.
Okay. And then one quick comment before I move on for Seth and Victor. Sorry to put you guys on the spot. When you speak, I really need you to speak into that microphone, or else the recording's not going to pick up your comments. I'm going to have a really hard time writing the minutes.
We know you do a really good job at that. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so if I could get my screen pulled up on the TVs, please. Okay, perfect. So we're going to go over some updates to the committee bylaws based on our conversation at the last Housing Advisory Committee meeting. So a hard copy of these edits should be in your packet. In red are all the additions, and then I've highlighted some things that we were discussing at the last meeting. So the first edit is under duties. So our duty was to hold a regular scheduled meeting at least quarterly. So I just added in that we would also hold special meetings outside of our quarterly schedule if needed. And then, so under attendance, if you move to the next section, so it is set up that our committee members are to attend in person. In-person attendance at a regularly scheduled quarterly meeting is highly encouraged outside of the excused in-person absence. And so a highlight to go over is that whenever an elected member of the HAC does not attend 3 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings, the chair shall notify the nominating agency of the absences and request action. So if anyone doesn't show up to 3 consecutive meetings, we have to review their participation. Yes, Commissioner Wade?
Just a minor point on that, but I think it's important. You refer to elected members of the HAC as being the planning commissioners and board of supervisors. The planning commissioners are not elected.
Okay. That highlight was just a highlight. I didn't add that in, so
Oh.
that previous language was already in the bylaws. I can amend that, though. We can go back and change that to say an elected or appointed member,
Okay.
if that is the will.
Okay, and then on here, is there anything specific on how the notification needs to be made in
Yeah.
terms of the absence and to whom? To the chair?
Go to the next section, AB 2449, amendments to AB 361. So I took this directly from the code that they put out, and I feel like Joel's comments might be that we don't need to add government code into our bylaws, but I wanted to put these in here just because we had a lot of questions regarding how these absences are going to work. So, okay, so the amendments to AB 361, so it revises the teleconference provisions, and it is in effect until January 2026. So it authorizes teleconferencing without complying with specific noticing requirements. So specifically, I don't have to notice the Zoom location anymore. I only specifically have to notice the in-person space where we're going to be holding the meetings. Now, I'm still happy to put the Zoom information on the agenda, so that's okay. It's just a stipulation of this amendment that we don't have to put out the remote link anymore. So it authorizes a member to participate remotely under specified circumstances, so including participating for a just cause or emergency circumstance. And we're just going to refer to these as excused in-person absence. And so what happened? So sorry guys. So the emergency circumstances are such as a physical or family medical emergency, or for just cause, including child care or caregiving needs. It could be a contagious illness, a disability, or travel on official agency business. So in this case, a member must notify the committee, provide a general description of the emergency, and disclose whether a person of 18 or older is going to be present in the meeting that they are participating in remotely. And so the member needs to request that the legislative body, so the committee, allow them to participate in the meeting remotely. So as far as procedure, if anyone can't participate in person due to one of these reasons, but they can participate remotely, you need to let me know, or the chair, as soon as possible. And then we actively have to act upon it at that meeting. So when the meeting comes up and one of you guys are participating remotely with your voting right, then we have to essentially make a motion that says you are approved to participate remotely today because you gave us your excused absence. So that's how that's going to work.
Okay.
Debbie, I had a question about the previous section where it talks about if someone misses 3 consecutive meetings, it gets referred back to the nominating agency or organization. Why wouldn't that apply to the public members also?
So once again, that's text that was in there before me. Maybe Joel, you could shed a little light on that. I don't know why it wouldn't be applicable to the public members versus just the, Seth, can you please restate your question for Joel?
I was wondering about the language in 5D, the existing language, where it talks about referring back to the appointing body if someone misses more than 3 consecutive meetings. Why that wouldn't apply to the public members of the HAC also.
So look at the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3. He's talking about item number D. It says.
I think, I'll let Joe look at it, but I think that was because as elected officials, there's a greater responsibility on us, their expectation versus your, from the public and volunteering your time. I think that's what the mindset was. But Joel can go ahead and chime in on the legal aspect.
Turn on. There we go. Frankly, this is a policy decision and not a legal matter.
I would think that if there was an issue, though, the chair of the HAC could take it to the Board of Supervisors, since they officially appointed the 3 public members, and the board as a whole could remove public members. But I mean, that would seem the way it would function, since there really isn't a clause for how you remove public members. But I would imagine that would be anyone appointed by the board can also unappoint.
Right. I was just looking for clarity. I mean, I thought that the requirement to attend meetings applied to all of us, and maybe that's not the case. If this is the only clause in the bylaws, I guess it doesn't.
As elected officials, the AB 361 applies to the elected officials, yeah.
Well, actually, it would apply to any member of a Brown Act constituted
Okay.
body. And since this is a regular, or a regular committee of the county,
Standing
it is
committee.
a Brown Act governed body.
Okay.
So maybe it's just an issue of semantics. Maybe we just need to add in whenever an elected, appointed, or
Well, let's not add verbiage to it, but out of respect, just communicate to the chair, whoever that is, your absence, and then if it becomes an issue, then we can have those individual conversations moving forward. But I know that you all step forward because you have a passion to serve and you have a keen interest in this topic, and so I don't expect that to be a problem. Yeah. And then at CSAC on Thursday, we did have a very good conversation about in section 6CA and the emergency circumstances and it being a disability. If you're a disability, it's not an emergency circumstance, it's an ongoing situation. And so there was heated conversation about that one word being in there. So I won't waste this committee's time on that, but we are all still talking about the semantics and the verbiage in this amendment, the AB 2449.
Through the chair, is it okay if I, on item D, we were going to revise that said whenever an elected or appointed member of the HAC, could we cross out the parentheses of Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors and just leave it as whenever an elected or appointed member of the HAC?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be better.
Okay, thank you.
That would cover everybody, because public members are appointed as well. Yeah.
okay, perfect. And then, did you have a question? And then just to be clear, when you are participating remotely with one of your 2 excused absences, you still have voting rights. If you if you're not using one of your 2 allotted absences and you're not here in person, but let's say you still want to participate via Zoom, you can do that. However, you do not have voting rights in that scenario. Okay. Oh.
There's a comment on Zoom.
Oh yes, John, please.
Hi. So at the last meeting when we were talking about this a little bit, I preferred the public members being separated out and not included as being appointed planning commissioner or supervisor. I think it's a different role. So I think it's important that we do differentiate. I'm not going to speak for Seth or Victor, but I'm working in San Francisco today, and I'm up here a lot right now. And so, but I'd like to continue to attend. But if I'm going to lose my vote, or it's going to be something where it becomes burdensome, to try and actually physically be there and then try and run up to San Francisco, which is 2 hours away. After the meeting, it starts to impede my ability to do my job. So I want to make sure that that's understood as well, that there's other things going on in life. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
100% appreciate your time outside of this committee, but I think Joel just made it fairly clear that if you're a member of this committee, that Brown Act applies to you, and so would these teleconferencing instructions. So as a member of this committee, you are required to either give us a reason for your absence to be able to participate 2 times remotely, or you will not be able to vote during meetings if we don't have one of those absences and you are participating remotely.
Right, and I get that for the quarterly meetings. I'm not sure about all the special meetings. I get it, the 2 consecutive quarterly meetings, that makes sense to me, and that's kind of what I signed on for. And then we've added a bunch of special meetings to get this to monthly. I'm not sure that qualifies. So, to the attendance rules.
Commissioner Way.
Yeah, if you read the language in Part D, it specifically talks about missing 3 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings. So if you miss the specials, you wouldn't be violating Part D.
Right.
And so that was a clarification. I believe I asked Joel earlier whether special meetings still comply, and I believe his response was that if it's a special meeting of the commission, even though it's special, it still has to comply with all of these rules. So I know we tried to set up the regularly and quarterly schedule to sort of get around that, but we cannot skirt around that in that way.
Well,
Well, again, this-
there's a distinction between attendance and the disqualification, which is not part of AB 361. That's a separate item in the bylaws itself. So you can write whatever disqualification for non-attendance into the bylaws. That's not, but if you're attending, the AB, if you're a member, the AB 361 rules still apply to a number of excused absences by which you can attend remotely. Those are 2 separate issues.
Thank you for that clarification, Joel. I was misunderstanding. So then, yes, I believe that is correct. Then the 3 consecutive absences will only be applicable to the regularly scheduled. Thank you for the clarification on that, Joel.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback on that. I think the 2 planning commissioners also work, so it's not like it takes out of our lives as well. So it applies to all but 2 of the members that none of us are getting paid.
Okay. Okay, so those are the amendments to our teleconferencing instructions. I've added those into our bylaws for clarity because I know we had a lot of questions. There's a few more highlights I just wanted to bring your attention to, as these were points of discussion at our last meeting. Alternates. So alternate committee members may be designated by each representation on the HAC. However, in order to have voting privileges, an alternate designated by an organization must be officially appointed as such by the Board of Supervisors after the vacancy of the member. So I believe the question at the last meeting was, would the chair be able to appoint an alternate if one of our public members couldn't be there so that they could have voting rights? The answer to that, based on our bylaws, is no. But is that something we could amend to have like an emergency public member appointed with voting powers?
With the concurrence of the Board of Supervisors, yes.
So is that something you guys would like to add as an additional amendment?
And are we talking at least 1 alternate? Say, for example, if any of the 3 couldn't be there, 1 alternate to cover.
And then they could possibly be a person that could cast a vote.
Is that the will of this board, or are we making it more
I
complicated
think,
than it needs to be?
Well, I would just say the public members are appointed because of their special expertise. And so they're not fungible, to use a fancy word. That you can't just plug somebody in randomly who would have the same expertise.
Yeah. As long as there's a quorum, there shouldn't be an issue.
And then John has a comment online. John?
Joel, I'm disagreeing with Joel. I would not prefer that. If I'm not available, then I lose my vote. I think that is fair.
Okay.
I don't think it makes sense for me to proxy somebody else into that. So I agree with Joel.
Okay.
And then I believe there was just one last point on here, and so any amendments to these bylaws need to be approved by a majority vote and then must be ratified by the Board of Supervisors. So it sounds like there's a few additional edits I'm gonna make, so I will bring this, okay. I'll bring this back at our next regularly scheduled meeting for us to make a motion on ourselves with the amendments, and then I'll have to go to the board for ratification. So those are the bylaws. Do I have any questions from my committee members?
So then that means we won't be seeing the revised one until the May meeting, with the expectation of approving them and then submitting them to the Board of Supervisors for their approval.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody? Because that's the way the
Yeah.
schedule is quarterly.
Yeah.
We're good?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay,
John also has his hand raised.
absolutely.
Sorry, one more question on B, rules of order. Are all committees in of the county governed by the Brown Act? I've heard that there were some that are not.
Joel, I would defer that question to you. I don't see rules of order. Hang on.
It's the ad hocs and the committees is a differentiation.
Oh, there we go.
In the,
I'm sorry, I am fielding some emails here, and I apologize for being distracted.
The question
no,
was,
that's okay. I had just heard that there were some committees that are asking not to be included in, be governed by the Brown Act. And I didn't know if that was a choice or if that's something that is, because this committee doesn't have legislative ability to change things. It's all advisory. And so I wasn't sure if we needed to be governed by the Brown Act rules of order. It's just a question. I'm not necessarily even looking for a response, other than I had heard that other committees are not governed by the county, are not governed by the Brown Act. I don't know if that's true.
There is a distinction for what are referred to as ad hoc committees. They are short term of a specified purpose, and they include, like this committee, less than a majority of either the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. There are advisory groups that are not a county committee, like the Emergency Medical Management Committee, which is purely advisory. It's not, their concurrence in any particular proposal is not required by law, but the way the Housing Advisory Committee is characterized in the Affordable Housing Ordinance, it makes its consideration and recommendation a mandatory part of the process. So it is my opinion that the Brown Act applies to this committee.
Okay, thank you.
thanks, John. And any other comment? Any public comment?
No, there is not.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next item. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Gibson.
Item number 10, Cal Home Grant.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So I'm just a quick update on the Cal Home Grant. So staff worked really hard trying to submit an application. However, after connecting with the state and meeting with them, it became very clear that we're not an eligible applicant for this grant because we have not administered a similar program to the programs we were looking at within the last 2 years, and that's a qualification. What we were going to do is partner with an administrative subcontractor. CSDC agreed to partner with us. However, we were unable to execute a full contract in a week, and the application was due on the 28th. So we were not able to submit our application for this grant. However, this is typically an annual grant, and staff are still going to be working behind the scenes to apply for this grant next year. We're going to try to get a contract set in place with CSDC to be our administrative subcontractor. And we're going to also take a look at some other options we can use for the grant. So the big three we were really looking at was using it to construct ADUs, a first-time home buyer program, which would provide mortgage and down payment assistance, I believe, and then the Joe Cerna farm worker housing program. So we're still going to try to look into viable options for those three things discussed, and we're going to try to apply for the Cal Home Grant next year. Do you have something you want to add, Ariel? No. Okay, so those are my updates for the Cal Home Grant. Do you have any questions for me? Okay.
Item number 11,
What about
review
public
board
comment?
direction from January 17th, 2023.
Do we need to do public comment? No? Okay. All right, you guys. So staff went back to review the meeting and direction from January 14th. So the minutes from this discussion have been included in your packet, and I highlighted points that I wanted to draw your attention to. So I do apologize for creating any confusion at our last meeting. While the board did not expressly direct us to make any additional amendments, they have asked us to analyze the following points and return to the board in April to discuss these amendments. So to this end, I've included in the packet a breakdown of our discussion per each item and highlighted points I wanted to bring your attention to in an effort to streamline the processing of information. And so at this time, I have to say that staff are looking for your input because I'm not quite sure how to move forward at this point. So I have an overview of all of our discussion per item and why we've made these decisions that we've made. So I guess my question to you is how would you like to proceed with going through these items or these discussions?
Well, I'm actually the one who kind of was a stickler on this one, and we were looking at the words 15% being the floor, and the Board of Supervisors sent this back to us to consider if there was another percentage that we would look at other than the 15% being a floor. And my concern is that we're here trying to establish and welcome affordable housing in the community. And if we look at the 20 or 25% that this committee was talking about last meeting, we're going to put the not open for business sign up for the county that we don't want affordable homes. It'll make it impossible for any developer to come in. And so I personally am not interested in embracing 25% at all. I would like to just keep it at the 15% floor and leave it at that number. But I'll defer to everybody else on this committee who wants to discuss it.
Commissioner Way?
Yeah, I just want to remind, or maybe I'm the one who's misremembering, but I think it was the case that we discovered in the last meeting that the 25% was actually a phantom number in the sense that nobody had really proposed 25. The top that anybody was really talking about was 20, I believe.
So to that point, Supervisor Kosmicki did say 25% during the board meeting.
Oh, okay.
So it did come out.
Committee member Supervisor Zanger.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember Joel explained, I think last time, that the 25 would require a lot more than 20,
Right.
and that, right, we'd have to go through like we'd have to deal with a whole thing with the state because 25, but 20 would be a number that could be more realistic, I think, than 25.
So anything more than 15% requires a housing feasibility study.
Okay, it does.
I actually Googled it. I did something on the internet where you find stuff, and it said it only applied to rental units. So we may dig further into that because it said that you may have to go and do a new study and you may have to get the approval of the HCD, but it said for rental units. So
per AB 1505, HCD may request to review the feasibility analysis for unduly constraining housing if any of the following are true. So if it includes more than 15% affordable housing, if the city or the county failed to meet 75% of their RHNA over a 5-year period, or if the city or county failed to submit a housing element for 2 years. So it is written into state law that HCD can request
at Google, you can't trust Google.
can request to review our housing feasibility study.
The county has not met its affordable unit number in almost a decade.
Not even close.
So for the 75% arena, we have failed that, but the other two we're in compliance with. So we have
Is
submitted
it
our
just
housing element.
one or all three that we have to?
If any,
If any, okay.
are true, the state can request to review it, and then they'll essentially either approve or deny it.
Can request, though.
Oh, Seth?
Thank you. You know, what we saw in the Lee subdivision was a request to substitute the low-income housing with moderate-income housing, or median-income housing above moderate-income housing. And I think that there's a huge recognition that that missing middle is really a huge need. But I think that, I mean, my feeling about that, my strong feeling was we don't want to do that at the expense of our low-income affordable housing. And I don't know if the affordable housing ordinance is the right vehicle or not, but what I'd like to see the Board of Supervisors look strongly at in terms of our whole zoning ordinance and our planning process is how we can do what it takes to make more workforce housing get built. I think it can get built at a profit and not done at the expense of our low-income housing program.
Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, thank you. Victor, you probably know, is there neighboring counties that are at 20%?
You know, the only jurisdiction that I could think of that is at 20% right now is the city of Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Okay. And my only comment that I've repeated at many meetings is we need to disengage affordable housing from market rate housing. We're going to have to build 3,500 to 4,000 units just to meet our the lower end of our affordable housing. And that's not going to get us anywhere because that's 6,000 more cars on Highway 25. So we need to find grants and other opportunities working with nonprofits to build truly affordable housing. We're not going to be able to build our way out of this by continuing our bedroom community solution.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a quick comment. There are, I happen to have 2 projects in the city, about 300 units that are fully affordable too. So let's take that into consideration. In many cases, you know, this we're going to get hung up. I feel like in many cases, jurisdictions get hung up on the percentage, right? So for every 100 units, you're going to have 15 that are deed restricted affordable, either for purchase or for rent. But let's not forget the other way to help us close this affordability gap is to, like you just shared, Commissioner Gibson, is to have more fully affordable units that are subdivided, that are subsidized, that provide again, full affordability. I share the concerns that Seth does, and the reason I would argue against the 20% is because if you go 20%, I'll tell you right now, I'll go back to my clients and they'll say, sure, I'll do 20%, but I'm not going to do extremely low. Let's do all, you know, moderate. Well, okay, that helps some, but there's a lot of folks. I grew up in affordable housing, right? And I benefited from it, and it was extremely low income, right? My parents were both immigrant farm workers, and so, but it benefited us. If we would have been closer to the moderate range, we wouldn't have owned a home, right? So I fear that if we go to 20%, my clients, I'll be candid with you, will come back and say, let's look at different income targets that are a little bit closer to market rate.
Trying to make it pencil out, yeah. Yeah, I think also the ADUs will offer an opportunity once our ADU program is up and running as it should. That, you know, a 1,200 square foot or a 750 square foot unit will not cost $1,500 to $2,000. Hopefully we can have enough, you know, provide incentive to have enough of them built where we can actually make something affordable for the people that work locally as well.
I would just offer that state law provides incentives for higher percentages of affordable units. If they meet a higher percentage of affordable units, they get certain benefits either in terms of density bonuses or ministerial approvals rather than requiring discretionary approvals. But those are so laden with other kinds of requirements like labor standards and so on that they're not really what they might appear to be on paper in terms of really producing a significant number of
Okay.
units.
Question for clarification. You, Joel, you use the pronoun they. Who's the they are you referring to? Is that the developers or they as in a county who?
I'm sorry, I'm
You said they, you used the word they, and then you didn't
in response
to, that if they have increased numbers.
that if a developer comes
developer,
forward with
okay.
a project that is 25% or more, there are certain incentives built into state law. But they have other conditions that go along with that.
Well, I understood your comment. I just wasn't sure who the they is that you were
Right,
referring
right.
to. So the developer, so if the developer wants to exceed the 15%, there is incentive. There are other criteria that they need to respond to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the county needs to embrace over 15%.
SB 35, SB 35 has, obviously has its own parameters, but there's also benefits to it too, like the density bonus program, right? So if you have those density bonus abilities within your project, it does help us, as many are looking for, right, is greater densities, add more units, right? Add more units. This parking lot here, as an example, right across the street from the probation department, I'm able to put 52 units on there, fully affordable. But right now, we're going back and forth with the city because we did submit an SB 35 and a density bonus application as well that will hopefully help us achieve 80 units, right? And same lot, we're not using more space, 30 less units built on in an orchard somewhere, right?
Yep, exactly.
And so those laws are all extremely beneficial to us.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee?
Yes. I just want to point out that, we're talking in terms of, 15 and 20 and so forth. And I'm not sure we're being sufficiently granular because 20 is fully 1/3 more than 15. That's a huge jump. And, maybe we should be discussing 17% or, it doesn't have to be 20, does it, if it's not 15?
Well, the expense and to go through another study and then go to the state, and I think if it's not a big jump, it may not be worth the investment.
Anything over 15 requires a housing feasibility study.
It's not just if the state asks for it.
So anything over requires a housing feasibility study, and the state can ask to review that study.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
And then at that point, the state would then either validate or invalidate our findings.
What's the cost and time invested in the feasibility study?
Do you know?
And
I wasn't here when we did our last one.
Who would
so.
be paying for
I
it?
think the last time around it was about 30,000, but with COVID, that took 2.5 painful years to get that thing approved. And I wouldn't want to venture through that process again if we could help it.
And I believe it was Vernaza Wolf Associates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Arrow's gonna pull up the information right now.
Is that study out of date now?
No, and that's what we use to do our in lieu fee.
And they didn't look at other percentages besides 15?
No.
Okay, Ariel's gonna look it up right now. I'm not sure about Ariel, but that definitely happened before my time here, so I have very limited knowledge.
I recall it, yeah. I recall it.
And then I will say, I know I've promised you this information before, and I'm very sorry I haven't sent it out, and I will do so, but I have like a collection of what the inclusionary requirement is for like our neighboring communities, and we're very much so in line with what our neighboring communities are doing. And let me just make this little note. I was trying to look it up on my computer, but of course, on the spot, I can't find it. But I have a full like spreadsheet put together of what our other communities
Yeah, if you wouldn't
are doing.
mind, sending that to us just so we have a comparison.
And then we touched on the first item, which was the 15%, and I've lost the page. Did we have a whole list
So
of
there's,
things?
okay, so there's at least 1, 2, 3, 5 items. Here's my suggestion. We're gonna come back and discuss this again next month. I don't have to go back to the board until April, and I'm hoping to meet the second April meeting for the board. So maybe if we discuss at least 2 or 3 of these items today, we can finish the rest next month. However, next month, well, this month and next month are special meetings, so if we need a motion on this, we're gonna have to take a motion on this. Sorry to my public members. So if that's something you guys wanna do, if we don't wanna go through all 5 today, we can split it up.
Okay, well, let's just kind of look at the items, because the first one is the 15% floor. What's the will of the board for us sending conversation back to the Board of Supervisors? Because I need to be able to defend this committee's actions.
Dom?
Yeah, well, maybe we just, what are we trying to do, is bring information back to the board,
I think
right?
that's what the board is requested, is just that we basically, this is my understanding, and this is not expressly what they said, but my understanding is that we're gonna take this information back and essentially defend our decisions, and give them the background information as to why.
Maybe then we bring it back to the board, present, what we would need a housing feasibility study, we present what other counties are doing and other jurisdictions and whatnot, and just kind of a full picture of it, and then the board can talk about it, I guess, and decide from there.
And I think Ariel's gonna jump in here.
Yeah, so what was brought to the board, we just finished it in May of 2022. And so I was trying to.
Feasibility study.
Yeah, the housing feasibility, it is current. And I'll try to pull up the sections right now that addressed going over. So we would be redoing some work we just finished.
Well, I like Supervisor Zanger's comment to bring it to the board and let them know what we discussed, and then let them direct us otherwise. So then, the next item then is in lieu fees. Now, I will say that there are at least 2 supervisors on the board that want to look at those more closely. So if we had to reduce all those 5 items down to, 2 or 3, I would hope that that one would be one that we can discuss to see what is the will of this committee in order to send the message back to the Board of Supervisors. I know that there's been a lot of work on the in lieu fees, and Commissioner Gibson can tell us the years he spent on this. Seth was on it also. Before I came on the board, I want to say there was a meeting that was ongoing for at least 2 years, if not longer, before it was approved in 2020 by the previous board, before I became on the board. There were some harsh numbers and some really good conversations and background. And just because we, as new sitting Board of Supervisors, have the ability to demand change doesn't necessarily mean we can go back and erase all the work that had been put in the deliberations and conversations. So I would like for this board to discuss it, but I don't think I need to say any more.
So through the chair, I think this isn't necessarily about the in lieu fee itself. This is about the qualifications for the in lieu fee. So those 3 qualifications we established, which were outside of 10 miles of an incorporated city, development requiring large lot development, and then doesn't have sewer or septic regulated by a public agency. So this isn't about the $30 fee itself. It's about those qualifications to elect the in lieu payment.
Yes, and they can request it, but they can request all they want. It has to go through the planning, at least the planning commission, and then to the board before they are allowed to try that. But I can't imagine a circumstance where that would work, because we always have the option of the off-site building, and to take a big check isn't in anybody's best interest, because construction costs never go down. And I believe, doesn't there have to be an option, Joel, for them? Don't we have to leave an option for them in our ordinance to satisfy state law? I recall something about not getting rid of the option because it had to be there.
Yeah, that was also my recollection. And I think he just answered your question about why wouldn't we make them build off-site units. So if a developer qualifies for those in lieu payments and he comes to the planning commission and the board and he requests those in lieu payments, well, if we can determine that he can build off-site units, let's say he owns another parcel somewhere or has an agreement with another person, then we could say, no, you have to build the off-site units. You don't qualify for an in lieu payment. But let's say that person didn't have that ability, and then they might qualify for the in lieu payment.
But it's certainly not a first or second choice. I mean, none of the bodies are going to be, oh, well, sure, just write a check, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't get units built. But if for some reason, if it were in such an area where we could just say, well, find some land that would make sense, and we'll take the land as your payment. And then we can get grants, work with the city of Hollister, and actually build affordable on the land that we took from that developer to satisfy the payment. So the point was never to just take a check if there was any other option.
Right, I understand. I understand it's unlikely that the planning commission, the board would opt for that. You know, they would accept the check. I guess I was just confused as to why we have the option then, if that's the issue, because
It's
just
state
legally
law that
we
we
just
have
would
to have
have
an
to have the option there.
State law.
But you're saying it would hardly ever be engaged upon.
Well, it wouldn't make sense for us because you're not going to, a check sitting in a bank account, it's with the rising costs of construction.
Yeah.
It would never make sense just to sit on the cash, and that's another subject to talk about.
And again, that would be part of their affordable housing plan, which has to go through approval from the HAC doesn't necessarily approve it, but the HAC gives strong recommendations, and then their approval to the planning commission, and then it will also be seen before the board. So it's something they have to request, and it's something you have to approve.
Right.
And it's something that's required by the law, state law, to allow them to have the option. So we can't just get rid of the option because we don't like it or we don't have faith in future elected and appointed bodies.
And so Supervisor Zanger, I had put basically the important parts of the discussion we had over the last year as to why we chose those 3 qualifications. But essentially, we looked at the 10-mile limit because that's what the Housing Authority of Santa Cruz uses for their Section 8 vouchers. And basically what the Housing Authority is saying is 10 miles outside of the city limit is reasonable for a low-income person because it should be fairly close to services and amenities. So we also agree that 10 miles outside of the city limit should be basically the maximum that you would put affordable housing. Because any further away from that, then we're putting low-income people all the way out in the middle of nowhere, and they're gonna have a really hard time getting to services. And then we used water or septic, not regulated by a public purveyor because of like some of the issues at Cielo Vista or over by Lover's Lane, I believe. They're all on their own like individual septics. So that's why we put that provision in. So to have affordable housing, you need to be connected to a public agency that's gonna have proper sewer and septic for your area. And then what was the third? Large lot development. It's gonna essentially be infeasible to an affordable developer to have to build somewhere that requires large lot development. It's too costly.
Right. And so, yeah, that makes sense. But just so I'm clear, just to clarify it, this was still just they can ask for the in lieu fee, right? And then
only if these 3 things are true.
Right. And if they are true, though, the board could theoretically say, well, no, just build off-site.
Sure.
Right.
If I could follow up on that, I think following up on what you suggested at the board meeting, Supervisor Zanger, some language in the ordinance that specified what you're talking about, Robert, that it's the preference of the county to see the off-site units get built. I think all too often with the language, the way it's written, the fee is gonna just get paid. And unless there's something to hang, for the board to hang their hat on, when they're saying this isn't just an option, this is a last resort.
I thought that we did have something in the ordinance.
Well, what we added was that off-site units need to result in the creation of newly constructed units and not piggybacking off another developer. So I don't think.
Which is a different issue,
Which
right?
is a different issue. I don't think we explicitly have language that says that if the in lieu fee could be used, the board would prefer off-site. I do not believe we have language such as that.
I like that idea. I think it helps.
Sure.
Say something about an in lieu fee would be accepted if off-site housing was shown to be infeasible.
All I can say is that feasibility is a slippery concept. It's feasible in the eye of the beholder, and there's not a uniform standard of saying, of determining what is or isn't feasible in any particular context.
How do we say that in legalese is that it's the preference of the county for the units to be built as opposed to accepting the?
Well, again, ultimately, it's going to be a policy decision by the Board of Supervisors. And whether that's you're hanging your hat on a preference or feasibility or whatever, it's 3 votes on the Board of Supervisors to actualize it, and one way or the other. And each project is going to stand on its own merits, so the particular facts of the situation are going to be under consideration. I don't think there's a way that you can, if you, and again, state law requires, some kind of alternative compliance mechanism that you can pin down exactly what that is without a case-by-case, fact-based analysis that ultimately comes down to a majority decision by the final authority, which is the Board of Supervisors.
Joel, does it make a difference legally if we have language in there that says it's preferred, though? Does that help if in a case when,
Well, as a board member, it might be a reminder to you. It might mean something different to your successor after your term in office is up.
Yeah.
So
The only way would be to put the word shall in there, and then you would be defying state law, which the whole ordinance would have an issue with, correct? If it's a shall, then it removes the option.
We'd need to look at the very specific language involved, and then
We're chasing our tails.
Yeah.
I think we just need
and
to
you
have
can
faith.
put the language in there, and the language would be
I don't know.
mandatory until challenged and a court ruled otherwise, It's,
I just
Seth?
want to say, I think what some of us are approaching here is it's easier to write good policy than when a local developer comes in and, is proposing changing things to meet, and they may have some good reasons around it. And at the end of the day, the board at that time could make a decision. But if the policy really is we want to see the housing get built, somehow expressing that in the ordinance, I think, can help in the future. If there's, we want to lay out the expectations for developers, what's going to be expected. And if we just say that an in lieu fee is an option, then that's what they're going to want to do.
I could swear we had some statement in the inclusionary housing ordinance that said that the goal was to actually build housing, but I haven't looked at it since we approved
I can try and do
it.
a quick search.
Yeah, you might be right.
But
I still think it wouldn't hurt to put at least the language about preference in here. If that is, if that's what the will of this board is,
Yeah.
I think it really does come down to policy versus individual circumstance. And, over the 50 years
Gesundheit.
I've been here, I've seen, it happen the other way.
Things vacillate, definitely.
Sorry, just for clarification, are we still talking about agendizing these items, or are we actually having the discussion right now?
So I think what we're doing is we're discussing the decisions we made to figure out whether, or what information we want to present to the board. Does that seem like an
It's-
accurate?
It's trying to guide staff to how they're going to make the presentation to the board.
And what I'm trying to do is I know the will of some members of the Board of Supervisors, and I'm just trying to articulate that so we can go ahead and memorialize that in our changes, so we don't keep bouncing it back and forth. It needs to be approved, it needs to be finalized, and I'm just trying to get there. Yeah.
And I have no problem adding language about preferences, but it's rainbows and unicorns at that point. There's no force of law. It's pointless to me, but if that's what makes everyone feel good, I'll go for it. Just my opinion. 1 of 7.
I like rainbows, I'll go for it.
Okay. You ride that unicorn under the rainbow. There we
And that
go.
might make the supervisors of the Board of Supervisors happy to see that language in there. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take to appease the naysayer. Yeah.
I have a question for Joel, actually. So if a developer wanted to ask for the in lieu fee and they were denied, is there some sort of legal process they could take to challenge that decision?
There is always a legal process to challenge the decisions by the county. It's called a writ of mandate, and there are a lot of technicalities, but but basically it depends on the nature of the decision, whether it's legislative in character or quasi-adjudicatory in character, which a project-based decision is probably going to be classified as quasi-adjudicatory. And so there are certain standards under the Code of Civil Procedure that apply to those two types of cases. I'm sorry to give you
That's fine.
a law school course on the on the matter, but it can get very complicated.
The short answer is they could take the county to court.
That's right. That doesn't mean they're going to win.
That's sort of, I think, why it might be, I don't know, it might be helpful to have that language in there that says we do prefer.
Sure.
Well,
It can't hurt.
Yeah.
And when I bring this back to the board, I can say that this was the discussion we had per this item, and that it is our recommendation that we add in this language and then get their opinion on that. How does that work for my committee?
Good.
Yes. I think
So
there's a
then,
consensus.
Supervisor Zanger, because I believe you're the one that brought up this item about the qualifications, do you have any more concerns about what those 3 qualifications are? Okay. Do I have any more questions about the qualifications for in lieu payment? So it sounds like we might revise some of the language, just to add in that it would be the preference to build offsite units versus awarding an in lieu fee. And we'll work on that verbiage and we'll take that back to the board.
Can you make sure that this body has the verbiage before you take it to the Board of Supervisors? Because I want to make sure I see what you're referencing that we all decided here.
So that specific edit, I'll make sure I have done before our next meeting, and then I'll just review it really quickly with you guys.
Okay.
So we did 2. Do you guys want to move on to the 3rd item for today, or do we want to review these, the last 3 at our next meeting? So that would be the in lieu fee for 5 to 10 units.
Can we, because normally we go until 1, that we still have 25 minutes, 22. Can we look at the in lieu? I want to hear the thoughts of this committee, the 5 to 10. I know, again, Seth and I know both Robert's position on this and why this is where it is now. But can we just open up the discussion, and if it looks like we're going to get to a solution, then we take that to the board. If not, then we continue it. But I would like to have this conversation. I would like to put this dispute to bed once and for all.
Okay, so yes, this was the option that we put in to pay an in lieu fee for the 5 to 10 units. Previously, there was no option. The in lieu fee began at 11 units, and then 1 through 10 units had no requirement. So we've added in that 5 to 10 units have to pay an in lieu fee. And then, for your understanding, there's only been about 4 developments in the last 5 years of that nature.
So what was the concern?
Yeah, I can't remember what,
Yeah.
I think hang on, I have some notes here. Okay, so Cosmicky wanted to nix the in lieu fee outside of fractional units, so that would be the 5 to 10 units. So it was a request to look into possibly removing the option to pay the in lieu fee for those units. Now, we put that in because we wanted to try and collect more in lieu fees, because in lieu fees can then be added to the fund and then perpetuate housing. And so previously we were collecting no in lieu fees between 1 to 10 units. So I'm gonna give it back to my committee. What is your guys' impression?
Victor?
Yeah, thank you. I would just say that on the contrary, no surprise, not necessarily agreeing with Supervisor Kosmicki. I would honestly say that if 5 to 10 units, I would say actually don't even try to build it. Pay the fee.
That's what it's set up as.
Yes, because there has to be I'll tell you, I'll take a step back really quick. It's never our desire to file a lawsuit against the county. If we went to the Board of Supervisors, number one, we would probably not want to go to the Board of Supervisors to ask you to allow us to pay the fee instead of building. If we could build on site we'll build it on site, period. And I have developers, market rate developers, that's their norm. They're used to 15%, and they will build it on site. They'll figure it out, right? And so they're not, to answer Supervisor Zanger's, or to expand on his thoughts earlier, we would never want it to go that far, right? If it came to a denial, two things would happen. We would move forward with building on site, or we would abandon the project and say, see you later, right? And so likely we wouldn't want to abandon the project. We would try to figure something out. But when it comes to these developments that are 5 to 10 units, I'll tell you, especially in the city of Hollister, every development I bring, I think the lowest amount of lots I've ever brought to the city council was like 90, right? And at that point, it's a little bit difficult to, to make a significant amount of headway in affordable units. So again, I would just say keeping it as an in lieu fee between 5 and 10 units is a good thing. It helps you at least collect some funding, because there may be times where an affordable housing developer will come in and say, hey, we need local subsidies, we need monetary subsidies, even if it's just for the land acquisition, right? Help us at least buy the land, county. You buy the land, we'll come in, we'll build the units, right? So anyway, I just wanted to share those initial thoughts, and happy to talk about it further. But I think in lieu, some revenue option would be beneficial to the county.
Can I just get a reminder of what Supervisor Kosmicki was suggesting instead of?
All I have written down was nix the in lieu fee outside of fractional units, and then his other.
I think he
his other
was trying to
comments.
force him to build a unit. I think that's what he
Well,
was
so the
going
thing-
for.
Affordable
so-
unit instead of the in lieu fee on the 5 to 10, right?
So the
Yeah.
thing is, there is no in lieu requirement for 5 to 10 units. They do not have to comply with the 15 or 20% requirement. They just have to pay an in lieu fee. So they're already not building affordable units. They're just paying an in lieu fee.
Well, then I have to imagine he was suggesting making them build affordable for the 5 to 10, right?
Part of the requirement. So I think there's a reason why we didn't include them in the 15% requirement, because A, we don't get a lot of developments that size. Ariel, help me out here. And then B, is it infeasible to a developer to have to require them to do affordable housing if they're only building 4 units?
Well, my reason for
units?
instigating it was because usually the smaller development would be a local person who employs local contractors and buys their materials locally, unlike the big boys who don't spend a dime here and they take the money and they run. So I was just trying to give a slight little preference to people that are actually building here and spending their money in this community.
And so help me out here. You're for the 5 to 10, or you're against the in lieu for the 5 to 10?
I wanted the 11, everything from 1 to 10 being exempt.
Everything from 1. Okay, so yes. Okay.
And to change it and try to force a small development to build, I think they'd probably just nix the project, which isn't a horrible thing, but we're going to end up with big boys that are like we have on Fairview, and there really isn't a contribution to the community other than more traffic from those people.
Okay. Of course, Seth, please.
It seemed to me that when we were doing the revisions to the ordinance, we talked about this at length, and we landed on exempting the first 5 and then phasing in the fees for the next 5. And it seemed like that was a good compromise. Otherwise, you're going to have this artificial cliff at 10. So that phase-in thing, I think, will make it more practical. But I certainly stand by what we sent to the board before and wouldn't support changing it at this point.
So there's a will to leave it as it is, but is there a consensus from this body whether we want to dig that up and beat that dead horse, or if we want to just leave it as is and have staff recommend that the board leave that particular section as is?
I would agree with you to leave it as is. Again, I've been privy to some of the conversations of the past, and there was a lot of thought process putting into it. And if we can assess some fees, let's get some revenue in, rather than not getting anything. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I don't understand the reason why there's pushback.
Commissioner Way?
I'm agreeing with what I'm hearing from everybody else who's spoken on this so far. I think is just let it sit as is, as far as I'm concerned.
But we're just determining what to tell the board, right?
Yes.
What we want to bring to them. So you just say, give them, I guess, reasons why we
The HAC is not interested in changing this particular section, and these are the reasons why.
Yeah, and what I can do is, like I said, I've already done the work in getting all of our comments for these items. So like, especially these highlighted ones, I can bring these points to the board. I think the ones that I've highlighted, I think are the really significant comments that really helped us like make our decisions. So, it
Real
may not be digestible, but we can tell them that we discussed it and that, you know, it is the HAC's impression that this provision should remain the way it is, and then I'll give reasons as to why.
You said there were 4 in the last 5 years, from 5 that were 5 to 10?
I believe so, yes. I have, it's in here.
It's like an example of one. Do we know? Does anyone know one off?
Okay, so 1 to 10, developments with 1 to 10 units that have been approved in the county in the last 5 years. Okay, there were only 2 developments with 5 or more lots, and only 4 developments with 10 or more lots that have been approved in the last 5 years. And then Ariel, you said those were, Vista del Calabria was Promontory also?
Yeah, Promontory.
Of the 5 to 10?
No, none of those are in that 5 to 10
No.
unit category.
Oh, no, not
Those are
it
just
was,
any housing
Dassel-
projects that were approved in the last.
Yeah, Dassel
Where's
was
behind Ridgemont?
5,
Bluff?
no, 6.
It's not part
and
of, yeah, no. Dassels, and I'm sorry, who else?
Dassel was the 5 to 10, and they had 6. I can't think of another one.
It
There
doesn't
haven't been
say
that
in these,
many.
we'd have to go back and verify which subdivisions those were, but when we were discussing this at length, we did all that research and figured out how many developments were coming through. So the answer was there aren't a lot of developments that are coming through below 10 units.
Right. Okay, that's yeah. You don't have to dig them up again. That's fine. I was just wondering if you knew offhand.
I have a list in the material somewhere. I can,
That's
I
fine.
can send
I'll
that
take
to
your
you
word for
if
it.
you
It's really
like.
not that important.
Okay. Okay, so then what is, okay, so have we decided that we would like to leave the provision as it stands?
I think that's a consensus. There's at least 4.
Okay. Do we need a motion on these first 3 items? Okay, so then we got through the first 3. There's only two left. Do you guys want to hold those discussions off for our next meeting?
They look rather small, but I don't know how the conversations may be.
Well, so basically these last 2 items we really didn't have a discussion about at our hack. So it was including very low income and for sale development. So through conversations with Seth and through his participation in the Planning Commission, I learned that very low previously used to be included in the ordinance, and at one point we took it out, probably around 2020, because it was decided that making single-family for-sale homes for very low persons would, for some reason, be inappropriate. Seth, do you want to add to that?
I think impractical.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, it seemed like it would be harder to integrate those units and make them affordable long-term into a single-family development. So it was appropriate to only include low income.
And we're talking about for sale units? Is that correct? Okay.
And I recall in reading some of like the previous memos from when they were doing that work, it also had to do with something with HCD and how they outlined those different income. So I can go back and try to find those notes, and we can send them off. Okay.
We should probably save this one then if you're going to bring us back to something, because there's just not much there for us to really discuss.
Okay, so we'll bring this item back. And then regarding the percentage breakdown between income categories, so Seth came to our planning commission where we discussed these ordinance amendments. And so the planning commission approved the ordinance with a small amendment that the 15% would be split evenly between the 2 income categories for sale, on-site for sale. So it was split between 7.5 and 7.5 for moderate and low income. And so I don't know that we necessarily need to have more of a discussion if we're not going to add very low into for sale, because it's already split evenly, and then our off-site developments are also split evenly at 5% per the 3 income categories. So I guess we can continue this, because I don't see a need to have this discussion if we're not going to include very low into the for sale developments.
Maybe I could just quickly let you guys in. You know, I've been to these meetings back from near the beginning, and it just escaped my attention that a couple of years ago, when we eliminated the very low income, it used to be 5% very low, 5% low, 5% moderate. And when that change was made, it became 5% low and 10% moderate. And I don't remember ever talking about that. I think that's just the way it got put in the language. And it seemed to me that wasn't in the spirit of our discussions, that 7.5 and 7.5, a 50-50 split made more sense. And that's what the Planning Commission agreed to and the board agreed to.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, hold off these two comments until we get a little more information on adding very low into the for sale section?
Yes, I would think so.
Okay. Through the chair, would we like to just move on to the last item?
Future agenda item? Is
Yeah.
that, yes, please?
And so if you could just pull up my PowerPoint one last time. I'm going to try to do an overview at the end of every meeting for the items we're going to try to work on. We need to get going on the administrative manual. That's on me. I need to do the background research, so I will get that on our agenda as soon as possible. I need to present to you the information on workforce housing. We have some statistical data that Assistant County Counsel Joe Ellenwood helped us collect. I'm hopeful to bring that back in April. We are going to talk about possible deed restriction sale of ADUs. That would require the county to adopt an ordinance. We're going to continue continue analyzing the board discussion items. And then it was directed in January to invite Devin back, so I will invite Devin to come February. We decided that on February, we didn't meet in January. To bring Devin back to present statistics on the permitting of residential developments in the region. So I will have him come back in April to do that as well. Okay. Any comments, questions, or any additional items you want me to address?
I'll throw something out. We have, give or take, $1 million in some account for affordable housing. What if we start discussions now to advise the board on how to spend that, maybe in works with the Calhoun grant, do something with the Chapel Road piece? That could be our 50% matching or whatever the matching would be. But instead of just having it sit there and lose money, which it's currently doing, maybe we should finally just use it.
Okay.
I mean, if we're not going to help, I don't know if Riverview 2 needs any help. I want to see these things happen a little more quickly. Riverview 3?
That doesn't exist yet.
Oh,
I was
okay.
like, what?
So perhaps it's time just to use it.
To start
Because
discussing?
with it, construction costs are never going to go down, and $1 million in 2 years could be worth $400,000. I mean, it's might be time to push the board into using the funds finally.
Absolutely. I think that's a great discussion. I know we talked about the use of the funds on more than one occasion, so I think it's a good time to bring it back.
The one comment I would have on the workforce housing item is we heard Superintendent Tenenbaum offer to do a survey of school district employees to determine how many multiple income households and what those levels are, to determine what the real need is there. Because the information that I gathered was simply to the publicly available salary schedules for public employees in the high school and elementary school districts and the police and fire departments. But we don't know how many folks are at what step level of those salary schedules, and what the recruiting needs are, and then again, how many multiple income households? Do you have a teacher and a fireman, or what is the actual need there? And I think Victor raised that issue earlier too, and that would be very useful to have that kind of survey data from the various public agencies. And then the other issue that in terms of giving preferences to local employees, or residents who need larger housing or different housing, we have a problem with state law, because state law was amended a number of years ago to prohibit discrimination on the basis of source of income. And that was intended to prevent discrimination against for people who are holding housing choice voucher, and landlords who are saying, well, you know, this is for rent, but I'm not taking anybody with a Section 8 voucher. Well, unfortunately, we have property management firms or companies that are saying, well, we can't provide a preference in favor of people who have housing choice vouchers or people who are local public employees, because that would be discriminating on the basis of source of income. So that's something that we, I think, need to bring to our legislators' attention and to get that clarified so that we can, in fact, have meaningful jobs housing balance. Again, if we offer affordable housing and all of the folks who need affordable housing that are in low and moderate income categories in Santa Clara counties say, hey, we can get it in San Benito, we're not accomplishing anything. And we're not accomplishing the goals that were set by the state when they established this jobs housing balance and they adopted vehicle miles traveled as a means of trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to have people be able to live where they work. And if you can actually document that relationship, then you have a lesser vehicle miles traveled impact. And so perhaps that's something that can be below a level of significance when you do CEQA. There are, again, a lot of moving parts here, but I think our policy goal that the state has articulated is to, again, have people live, work, and the developers add play to that, you know, in a location.
And what would the role of the hack be in that process?
Well, again, to get public agencies, either county or city or school districts, to cooperate with us to assess the need for workforce housing by surveying the actual need. How many people are at which step? You know, he says we have 400 employees. How many of them are at step 1? How many are at step 9, or however many steps there are in their salary schedule? And how many of them are already are homeowners or are renters? And what is the nature of their need? It probably would be a good idea to engage a survey research firm to assist in that, designing what the survey is and then administering it so that we have reliable data, and that would be something that I would envision we would be integrating in the housing element update. So we have specified categories of need that the housing element law says we have to address, but we can add workforce housing to that. And there is, again, an emphasis in state law that's been ignored by HCD when they've set RHNA goals of what the jobs housing balance, how that should affect the RHNA goals for a particular area.
So the hack could request that staff look into that and then provide that to the board, since they'll be the ones approving or denying the funding for such a study?
Yes. And John has a comment. John?
I just wondered if you should expand with all the new changes to the ADU laws, expanding that ADU section into something broader with the JDUs and other things that might, I think we're going to see a lot more coming in front of us. the recent city council meeting, they talked about a lot of the new rules and about making sure our laws are in line with, the various new rules, sharing a bathroom, sharing, all the different things that are coming up and whether or not it makes sense. I know planning is certainly a big part of that, but how do we work that into, affordable housing ordinances to make sure we're encouraging, where appropriate, the building of ADUs and JVs.
Do the deed restricted sale of low-income ADUs, we have to adopt an ordinance. So we're going to first talk about that here, maybe draft the ordinance here and bring it to the board. So that's going to be an ongoing item that we're going to be working on.
Has anybody asked the assessor?
No, have we? I don't know.
I would see if they even have capability to do, wouldn't that involve the assessor's office? If it's deed restricted?
It would be like a condo, you'd own the airspace, not the dirt.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a huge burden on the assessor?
Well, and the county does deed restrictions through the affordable homes, so I think it would just be the same process, would it not? The same process that we do deed restriction for inclusionary units? Yeah, so we would help draft documents and they would sign it and those documents would go to be
We're
recorded.
going to need some help from the state and other jurisdictions looking for models for this. The condominium or airspace model is one, because you're not, but applying that model, there's a whole common interest development set of regulations that are not designed for ADUs, but they're designed for multiple unit types of development. So, this is an idea that needs to be developed, but it's probably not
In your spare time,
ready for prime time.
could you come up with that by next week, Joel?
Sure.
Sure,
No
okay.
problem. And we'd be piloting for the state, but
Okay.
So yes, John, that is something that we're actively working to look into.
Okay.
Fantastic. Are we at the point of asking for adjournment? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? We have a first and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously.
Thanks so much,
Meeting's
everyone.
adjourned. Thank you.